Park sat alone in the corner of the mess hall, eating his rice slowly while the other pilots laughed and talked at their tables. He was 34 years old, which made him the oldest pilot in the auxiliary fleet. Most pilots his age had either moved up to command positions or left the service entirely, but was still here, still flying cargo ships and escort missions that nobody else wanted. He didn't mind, the quiet suited him. The mess hall screens flickered to life, and everyone stopped talking. Fleet Admiral appeared on the display, her face serious and proud at the same time. Behind her stood several tall figures with blue skin and 4 arms. They had heard of them but never seen one in person. They were warriors, proud and ancient, with an empire that stretched across 1,000 star systems. Today, I am pleased to announce a joint mission between the Terran Alliance and the Dominion, Admiral said. We will be sending a combined fleet into the Obsidian Nebula to establish a new trade route. This mission represents the first major cooperation between our species. The pilots around began whispering excitedly. The Obsidian Nebula was dangerous, yes, but it was also a chance for glory. Everyone knew that the pilots selected for this mission would return as heroes. They have specifically requested humanity's finest pilots, Admiral continued. After careful consideration, we have selected Commander to lead our squadron. Cheers erupted across the mess hall. Was a legend. She had 40 confirmed kills against pirates and hostile aliens. She was young, beautiful, and brilliant. Everything that was not. Finished his rice and stood up to leave. He had cargo to transport to Station 12. The mission to the Obsidian Nebula was not his concern. But then his communicator beeped. He looked down at the message and frowned. It was an assignment order. He was being transferred to the flagship as a backup pilot for the Obsidian Nebula mission. Backup pilot. The words felt heavy in his chest. It meant he would sit in a small room monitoring systems, ready to take over if something happened to the real pilots. It was a formality, nothing more. A box to check on some bureaucrat's list. Still, orders were orders. Packed his small bag and reported to the transport shuttle. The flagship was called the Blade of Ancestors. It was enormous, nearly 3 kilometers long, shaped like a curved sword cutting through the darkness of space. Had never seen anything so impressive. Human ships looked like blocks of metal compared to this elegant weapon. When he boarded, an officer met him at the airlock. The alien was tall, nearly 7 feet, with deep blue skin and silver eyes that seemed to look right through him. All 4 of her arms were crossed over her chest. "You are the human backup pilot," she said. Her translator made her voice flat and mechanical. "Yes," replied Lieutenant Park. "I am Officer Allah. Follow me. Try not to get in the way." Followed her through the winding corridors of the ship. Warriors watched him pass with expressions that ranged from curiosity to open contempt. He was used to being looked down upon, so he simply kept his eyes forward and said nothing. The backup station was a small room near the engineering section. It had a single chair, several monitoring screens, and a cot for sleeping. It was clear that no one expected him to actually do anything important here. "Remain here unless called," Ah said. "The pre-mission briefing will begin in 2 hours. You may attend but stay at the back." She left without waiting for his response. Sat down in his chair and began checking the systems. Everything was unfamiliar, but the basic principles were the same. Engines, navigation, weapons, life support. He spent the next hour learning the control layouts, memorizing the symbols and patterns. When the briefing began, he made his way to the large conference chamber and stood at the very back, just as he had been told. The room was filled with officers and a handful of human pilots. Commander stood at the front, next to the commander. The commander was called. She was older than the other, with scars on her face and arms that spoke of many battles. Her silver eyes were cold and sharp. When she spoke, everyone listened. "The Obsidian Nebula is not a place for the weak," said. Dozens of civilizations have lost ships there. The hollow at the center of the nebula is where navigation systems fail and the void stalkers hunt. These creatures feed on energy signatures. They are fast, intelligent, and merciless. She brought up a holographic display showing twisted monsters with too many limbs and mouths full of glowing teeth. Several of the human pilots shifted uncomfortably. Our mission is to chart a safe path through the nebula, continued. We will proceed slowly and carefully. Commander will lead the human squadron. I will command the forces. Together, we will succeed where others have failed. Admiral spoke next, praising the cooperation between the two species and expressing confidence in the mission's success. Barely listened. He was watching. There was something about her that felt familiar, though he couldn't say what. She carried herself like someone who had seen too much death and refused to let it break her, understood that feeling. After the briefing, the pilots gathered in small groups to talk, was surrounded by admirers, both human and. She smiled and laughed, accepting their praise with grace. Turned to leave, but a voice stopped him. You are the backup pilot. He turned and found standing behind him. Up close, she was even more intimidating. Her 4 arms hung at her sides, relaxed but ready. Her silver eyes studied him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Yes, Commander said. You are older than the other human pilots. Why are you still flying cargo ships? It was a direct question, almost rude by human standards, but sensed no malice in it, only genuine curiosity. I fly where I am needed, he said simply. Tilted her head. A strange answer. Most humans I have met are eager to prove themselves. They seek glory and recognition. You seem to want neither. Shrugged, glory doesn't keep ships flying. Recognition doesn't save lives. I just do my job. For a long moment said nothing. Then she nodded slowly. Perhaps you are not as useless as I first thought, Lieutenant Park. We shall see. She walked away, her long stride carrying her quickly across the room. Watched her go, feeling strangely unsettled. He couldn't remember the last time someone had actually looked at him, really looked, instead of just seeing another face in the crowd. He returned to his small backup station and lay down on the cot. Tomorrow, the fleet would enter the Obsidian Nebula. Tomorrow, Commander would lead the squadron into danger while sat in this room, watching screens and waiting for nothing to happen. That was his role, that was his place. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but old memories kept drifting through his mind. Memories of fire and blood, of screaming warriors and a sky filled with enemy ships. Memories of a scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow, hidden now beneath his sleeve. Some things were better left forgotten. But knew, deep in his bones, that the past had a way of finding you no matter how far you ran. And as the blade of ancestors began its journey into the darkness of the Obsidian Nebula, he couldn't shake the feeling that his past was about to catch up with him. 3 days into the Obsidian Nebula, everything still seemed calm. The fleet moved slowly, carefully, with scout ships flying ahead to check for danger. Spent his time in the backup station, watching the screens and learning more about the ship systems. He had nothing else to do. The nebula itself was beautiful in a terrible way. Clouds of purple and black gas swirled around the fleet, lit from within by dying stars. Sometimes could see the shapes of old wrecks drifting in the distance, the remains of ships that had tried to cross this space and failed. He counted at least 40 different designs, from species he recognized and many he did not. On the 4th day, the fleet reached the edge of the hollow. Commander's voice came through the communications channel, confident and strong. All pilots, prepare for reconnaissance formation. We're going to map the outer boundary of the hollow before we try to cross it. Stay close to your wingmen and keep your sensors active. Watched the tactical display as the human squadron formed up. Took the lead position, with 12 other pilots spreading out behind her in a wide arc. The ships held back, providing cover and long-range support. For the first hour, nothing happened. The pilots called out readings and observations, building a map of the hollow's edge. It seemed almost routine. Then the first ship disappeared. One moment, Lieutenant Han was flying on the left flank, reporting normal readings. The next moment, her signal vanished from the display. No explosion, no distress call, just gone. "Report," called out. "Han, do you copy?" "Silence." "All ships hold position," ordered. "Something is." The Void Stalkers came from everywhere at once. Had seen the holographic images during the briefing, but those pictures did not capture the horror of the real creatures. They were massive, each one the size of a small ship, with bodies that seemed to be made of twisted metal and living flesh. Their eyes glowed with stolen energy, and their many limbs ended in claws that could tear through armor like paper. They moved through space without engines, somehow swimming through the void like sharks through water. And they were fast, impossibly fast. "Break formation," screamed. "Evasive maneuvers, fire at will." The tactical display became chaos. Ships scattered in every direction while the Void Stalkers pursued them with terrible precision. Weapons fire lit up the darkness, but the creatures were hard to hit. They twisted and turned, dodging most attacks, and the shots that did connect seemed to do little damage. Gripped the arms of his chair, watching helplessly as the squadron was torn apart. 3 more ships vanished in the first minute, then 2 more. The vessels opened fire with their heavier weapons, trying to drive the stalkers back, but there were too many of the creatures. "Commander, fall back," ordered over the command channel. "Your squadron cannot survive this. Retreat to the fleet." "Negative," replied, her voice tight with determination. "We can't leave our people behind." She turned her ship around and flew straight at a Void Stalker that was chasing one of her pilots. Her weapons blazed, striking the creature across its face. The stalker screamed, a sound that seemed to exist inside's mind rather than in his ears, and turned its attention too. For a moment, it seemed like she might actually drive it back. Was an excellent pilot, the best humanity had, and she flew her ship with skill and courage that could only admire. But the stalker was not alone. A second creature came from below, moving so fast that the sensors barely registered it. It slammed into ship with tremendous force, sending her spinning through space. Saw her shields fail, saw the hull crack open, saw the flash of an emergency ejection pod launching into the darkness. "Primary pilot down," someone screamed over the comms. "Commander is down." The remaining pilots panicked. Without their leader, they scattered in different directions, making themselves easy targets for the stalkers. They tried to provide cover fire, but the creatures were hurting the survivors, pushing them deeper into the hollow. Stood up, his hands were shaking, but his mind was clear. He ran. The corridors of the Blade of Ancestors were filled with rushing crew members and shouted orders. Pushed through them, following the path he had memorized from the ship's layout. His legs burned and his heart pounded, but he did not slow down. When he reached the command deck, he found organized chaos. Stood at the center, giving orders in rapid while her officers worked frantically at their stations. The main display showed the battle outside, ships dying one by one. "What is our status?" demanded. 11 human ships remaining, an officer reported. "They are being pushed toward the hollow's center. If they go much deeper, their navigation systems will fail completely." "And the stalkers?" "At least 30 confirmed. More are arriving." 4 hands curled into fists. "We cannot abandon them, but if we follow, we risk the entire fleet." Stepped forward, "Commander." Every on the bridge turned to look at him. Their expressions ranged from surprise to annoyance. He was the backup pilot, the cargo hauler, the human who was supposed to stay in his small room and stay out of the way. "Who let this one onto the command deck?" one officer growled. "I let myself," said calmly. "Commander, your primary human pilot is down. I am the backup. I am requesting permission to take the helm." stared at him. Her silver eyes were hard and assessing. "You are a cargo pilot. You transport supplies and equipment. This is a combat situation." "Yes," agreed. "And if no one takes command of those ships out there, they will all die. I may be a cargo pilot, but I can fly. Let me try." "Try," another officer laughed. "This is not a training exercise, human. Those are void stalkers. They have killed warriors far greater than you." Met the officer's eyes without flinching. "Then I will die trying, but I won't die hiding in a backup station while other pilots are being slaughtered." Silence fell over the bridge. The officers looked at, waiting for her decision. Studied for a long moment. There was something in her gaze, something almost like recognition, though couldn't understand why. "You are either very brave or very foolish," she said finally. "Probably both," admitted. His mandibles twitched. It might have been the equivalent of a smile. "Very well, Lieutenant Park. Take the auxiliary helm station. You will coordinate the surviving human ships from here. But understand this, if you fail, you will die with them." Walked to the helm station and sat down. The controls were different from what he was used to, but he had spent 3 days studying them. His hands moved across the interface, connecting to the fleet communication network. "All surviving human pilots, this is Lieutenant Park," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I am taking command of the squadron. Form up on my signal. We are going to get out of this." There was confusion on the channel. Voices asked who he was, why they should listen to him, where Commander was. Ignored the questions. There was no time for explanations. "Listen to me," he said. "The stalkers are herding you toward the hollow's center. If you keep running that way, your navigation will fail and you will be lost. I need you to trust me. Cut your active sensors. Go to passive only. Reduce your power output to minimum." "That's crazy," a pilot shouted. "We won't be able to see anything." "The stalkers hunt by energy signatures," replied. "If you go dark, they will lose track of you. I will guide you out. One step at a time, but you have to trust me." For a terrible moment, no one responded. Then a young voice spoke up. "This is Ensign. I'm cutting my sensors now. What are your orders, Lieutenant?" One by one, the other pilots followed. Their signals faded from the tactical display as they powered down, becoming almost invisible to the sensors. Took a deep breath and began to work. He watched the patterns of the stalkers, tracked the movements of the invisible human ships, and started calling out directions. The real battle had just begun. The command deck of the Blade of Ancestors had fallen silent. Every officer watched the human at the auxiliary helm station with a mixture of doubt and curiosity. This was Lieutenant Park, a backup pilot, a cargo hauler, a man who had been assigned to this mission as nothing more than a formality. And now he sat in the pilot's chair, trying to save 11 ships from certain death. Commander stood behind him, her 4 arms crossed over her chest. She had agreed to give him a chance, but she did not truly believe he could succeed. Humans were capable creatures, she knew, but this situation required more than capability. It required something extraordinary. His hands moved across the console, pulling up sensor data and communication channels. The surviving human ships had gone dark, reducing their power output to almost nothing. On the tactical display, they were barely visible, just faint ghosts drifting in the chaos. The Void Stalkers were confused. They circled the area where the human ships had been, searching for the energy signatures they fed on. But with their prey hidden, they began to spread out, hunting blindly. "Ensign," said into the comm, his voice low and steady. "Turn 15 degrees to starboard. There is a stalker passing 300 meters to your port side. Do not increase power, just drift." "Copy that," came the whispered reply. Watched the display, tracking the invisible ship's probable position based on its last known trajectory. The stalker passed by, close enough to touch, then moved on. Was safe for now. But there were 10 more ships to guide, and dozens of stalkers hunting them. stepped closer, studying the human's technique. He was not just giving random orders. He was building a mental map of the entire battlefield, tracking every ship and every creature, calculating trajectories and predicting movements. It was impressive work for any pilot, let alone a backup. "Lieutenant, maintain your current heading for 30 seconds, then cut your engines completely," continued. "You are approaching a debris field. Use it for cover." "How can you see all this?" another pilot asked, his voice shaky with fear. "Our sensors are down. We're flying blind." "I am your eyes," replied simply. "Trust me." The minutes passed slowly. One by one, guided the ships through the maze of stalkers and debris. He never raised his voice, never showed any sign of stress, even when two stalkers came within meters of a human vessel. His calm was almost unsettling. Notice that his hands never stopped moving. Even as he spoke, he was constantly adjusting readings, checking data, calculating new routes. The concentration required must have been enormous. And then she saw something that made her freeze. Had pulled off his gloves to get a better grip on the unfamiliar controls. His sleeves had pushed back slightly, revealing his forearms. And there, running from his left wrist to his elbow, was a scar. It was not an ordinary scar. It was jagged and silver-white, with a distinctive pattern that recognized immediately. Her heart began to pound in her chest. "Stop," she commanded. Glanced up at her, confused. "Commander, I cannot stop. The pilots." "I said stop." Her voice was hard, almost angry. "Where did you get that mark, that scar on your arm? Where did it come from?" The bridge fell completely silent. Every officer stared at the two of them, sensing that something significant was happening. Looked down at his exposed arm. For a moment his calm expression flickered, showing something older and deeper beneath. Pain, perhaps, or memory. "IV," he said quietly, 12 years ago." His breath caught in her throat. Her silver eyes went wide. Behind her, she heard gasps from her officers. One of them dropped a data pad with a clatter. "You were at IV?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Met her gaze steadily. "Yes." The name IV was sacred among the. It was the site of their greatest shame and their greatest miracle. 12 years ago, 300 warriors had been sent to IV to defend a colony from the Eth swarm, a race of predators that consumed everything in their path. But the mission had been a trap. The swarm's numbers were far greater than expected, and the relief fleet was ambushed and destroyed before it could arrive. The 300 warriors on the surface were abandoned. Cut off from rescue, surrounded by millions of enemies, they prepared to die with honor. But they did not die. On the third day of the siege, a single human cargo ship had broken through the swarm's blockade. It was not a warship, just a small transport vessel with no military equipment. But its pilot had landed in the middle of the kill zone, opened his cargo bay, and started handing out whatever weapons and supplies he had. Then he had picked up a rifle and joined the fight. For 6 days, that human pilot had fought beside the warriors. He was not trained for ground combat, not equipped for it, not prepared for the horror of fighting the swarm up close. But he refused to leave. When they fell back, he fell back with them. When they charged, he charged at their side. He carried wounded warriors on his back, dragged supplies through enemy fire, and held defensive positions that should have been impossible to hold. On the 4th day, a swarm blade had cut his arm from wrist to elbow. Any normal human would have collapsed from the pain and blood loss. But this pilot had wrapped the wound with cloth torn from his own shirt and kept fighting. On the 6th day, a rescue fleet finally arrived. By then, only 87 of the original 300 warriors were still alive. The human pilot had personally carried the last 12 wounded onto the evacuation ships. Then he had disappeared. They had searched for him afterward. They wanted to honor him, to thank him, to give him the recognition he deserved. But the human military said he was just a cargo pilot, nobody special, and they could not locate him. It was as if he had vanished into the vastness of space. They called him. It meant brother. He was a legend among their people, a human who had earned the respect of warriors through blood and sacrifice. And now he was sitting at the helm of the blade of ancestors, stared at with new eyes. This quiet, unassuming man, this backup pilot who had been overlooked and dismissed, was the hero of IV. "You are the," she said. It was not a question. His expression did not change. "I am just a cargo pilot, Commander. That is all I have ever been." "Do not lie to me." His voice was fierce. "I was there. I was one of the 87 who survived. I saw you carry my brothers and sisters through fire and death. I saw you bleed for people you did not know. Do not tell me you are nobody." For a long moment they stared at each other. The officers watched in stunned silence. Then sighed. It was a small sound, tired and old. "That was a long time ago," he said. "I did what anyone would have done." "No," replied firmly. "You did what no one else could have done, what no one else was willing to do. You were a cargo pilot with no weapons, no training, no reason to help us. But you came anyway. You bled for us. You earned a scar that marks you as one of our own." She reached out and touched the silver scar on his arm. It was a gesture of profound respect among her people. "I have waited 12 years to find you," she said softly, "to thank you, to tell you that they have not forgotten." Looked at her, and for just a second his calm mask slipped. She saw exhaustion and grief, and something that might have been hope. Then he turned back to the console. "Thank you, Commander," he said quietly. "But right now I have 11 ships to save. Will you help me?" Straightened up, her 4 hands curling into fists of determination. "Asks for my help," she announced to the bridge. "Today the answer. All officers, you will follow Lieutenant Park's commands as if they were my own. Is that understood?" The response was immediate and unanimous. "Yes, Commander." Allowed himself a small smile. Then he returned his attention to the tactical display. "All right," he said, "let us bring them home." The revelation of his identity changed everything on the bridge of the Blade of Ancestors. The officers who had looked at him with dismissal now watched him with deep respect. Some even bowed their heads slightly when he gave orders. Though the brother was among them, it was an honor they had never expected. But had no time to think about any of that. 11 human ships were still trapped in the hollow, surrounded by void stalkers, and their time was running out. "Commander," he said, his eyes never leaving the tactical display, "I need your long-range sensors focused on the stalkers. Track their movement patterns. I think they hunt in coordinated groups like wolves." Nodded and gave the order. Within seconds, new data began flowing to his console. He studied it carefully, looking for patterns in the chaos. "There," he said, pointing to a cluster of stalkers on the display. "They move in threes. When one finds prey, the others circle around to cut off escape routes. If we can break their formation, we can create gaps for our ships to pass through." "How do we break their formation?" asked Officer Ah. Her tone was respectful now, completely different from when she had first met. "We give them something else to chase," replied. "A distraction." He opened a channel to the surviving human pilots. "All ships, listen carefully. In exactly 2 minutes I need you to power up your engines to 50% for exactly 3 seconds, then immediately cut power again. Do it together at exactly the same moment." "But that will draw the stalkers right to us," Lieutenant protested. "Yes," agreed. "For 3 seconds they will have 11 targets. Then you go dark again and move. The stalkers will converge on your last position, but you will not be there anymore. I will guide each of you to a new location." "That is insane," another pilot said. "Probably," admitted, "but it will work, trust me." There was silence on the channel, then Ensign spoke up. "I trust you, Lieutenant, tell us when." One by one, the other pilots agreed. Their voices were scared but determined. Watched the clock, counting down the seconds in his head. He had already calculated the new positions for each ship, based on the stalker's movement patterns and the layout of the debris field. It was a complex mental puzzle, the kind of thing that should have required a computer to solve, but had always been good at seeing patterns that others missed. "Ready," he said. "Power up in 3, 2, 1, now." On the display, 11 faint energy signatures suddenly flared to life. The stalkers reacted immediately, turning toward the signals with terrifying speed. "Power down," commanded. "Hard to port, dive 30 degrees. Sergeant O, full stop and drift. Everyone else follow my directions exactly." He began calling out commands in rapid succession, his voice calm and steady despite the chaos unfolding on the display. The stalkers converged on the last known positions of the human ships, but the ships were already gone, drifting silently through the darkness in new directions. For a moment the creatures seemed confused. They circled the empty space, searching for prey that was no longer there. "It is working," said, amazement in her voice. "Not yet," replied. "This only bought us time. We still need to get them out of the hollow entirely." He studied the tactical display, looking for a path through the maze of stalkers and debris. The hollow was a nightmare of twisted space, where navigation systems failed, and even the stars seemed to shift and move. Any ordinary pilot would have been hopelessly lost within minutes. But was not an ordinary pilot. He had spent years flying cargo routes through some of the most dangerous space in the galaxy. He had learned to navigate by instinct, by the feel of his ship and the patterns of light and shadow around him. Most pilots relied on their computers, relied on himself. "All ships form on my directions," he said. "We are going to fly through the hollow in a single line. I will guide the lead ship and everyone else will follow exactly in their path. No deviations, no hesitation. If I say turn left, you turn left. If I say stop, you stop." "How can you guide us through?" Sergeant O asked. "Your sensors are the same as ours. You cannot see any better than we can." "I am not using sensors," replied. "I am using my eyes." He switched to a direct visual feed from the blade of Ancestor's external cameras. The images were dark and distorted, filled with swirling clouds of nebula gas and the distant gleam of dead ships. It was almost impossible to make sense of what he was seeing. But look deeper. He watched the way the gas moved, the direction of the debris, the subtle shifts in light that indicated gravitational currents. The hollow had patterns just like everything else. You just had to know how to read them. "Ensign, you are the lead ship," he said. "Heading 275, 15 degrees down angle. Speed 1/4 thrust. Go." Ship began to move. On the display it was barely visible, a ghost drifting through the darkness. "Steady," continued. "In 10 seconds you will feel a pull to starboard. That is a gravity eddy. Do not fight it. Let it take you, then correct with a gentle port thrust." The seconds passed. Watched the visual feed, saw the barely perceptible shift in the nebula clouds that indicated the gravity eddy. "Now," he said. Ship shuddered but held its course. The young pilot followed instructions perfectly. "Good, continue on heading. There is clear space ahead for approximately 2 kilometers." One by one, the other ships followed path, guided them around debris fields and through gravity eddies, warning them of stalker movements and adjusting their courses in real time. It was an incredible feat of concentration, the kind of thing that no human should have been able to do for more than a few minutes. Did it for 3 hours. The officers watched in amazement as the human pilot worked. His eyes never left the screens, his hands never stopped moving, his voice never wavered. He was like a machine, processing information and making decisions faster than any of them could follow. But he was not a machine. He was a man, and the strain was starting to show. Halfway through, blood began to trickle from his nose. He wiped it away without comment and kept working. His face grew pale and his hands started to tremble slightly, but he did not stop. "Lieutenant Park," said quietly, "You need to rest. You are pushing yourself too hard." "Cannot rest," replied his voice hoarse. "Almost there, just a little more." He guided the last ship around a cluster of stalkers, threading it through a gap so narrow that the creature's claws scraped against the hull without penetrating. "Clear of the hollow," he announced. "All ships, increase power to 50% and proceed to the fleet rendezvous point." Cheers erupted over the communications channel. The surviving pilots could not believe they had made it. Against all odds, against creatures that had killed hundreds of ships over the centuries, 11 human vessels had escaped the hollow alive. And it was all because of one backup pilot. Slumped in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. His vision was blurry and his hands were shaking badly. He had pushed himself far beyond his limits and his body was demanding payment. Moved to his side, placing one of her 4 hands on his shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved them all." Managed a weak smile. "Not all, Commander." "Her escape pod was recovered by one of our ships," assured him. "She is injured but alive. You saved her too. You saved everyone." Closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt something other than tired. He felt proud. "Contact the Alliance," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell them we are coming home." Then he passed out in the pilot's chair, surrounded by warriors who had finally found the hero they had been searching for. The journey back to Terran space took 5 days. Spent most of that time in the medical bay, recovering from the strain of his impossible flight through the hollow. The doctors treated him with a level of care and respect that surprised the human medical staff who came to check on him. They did not understand why the aliens were so interested in a backup pilot. The surviving human pilots understood. They visited whenever they could, bringing small gifts and words of thanks. Ensign came every day, sitting by his bed and telling him about her family back on Earth. She was 19 years old, and she had been certain she was going to die in the hollow. Now she had a future again because of him. Commander also visited, once she had recovered enough to walk. Her arm was in a cast, and she had bandages across her face, but she was alive. She stood at the foot of his bed with an expression he could not read. "They told me what you did," she said. "How you took command when I went down. How you guided everyone out of the hollow using nothing but visual observation and instinct." Shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "Someone had to do it." "No," said. "Anyone could have tried, but only you could have succeeded. I am the best pilot in the fleet, Lieutenant Park. At least I thought I was. But what you did out there, I could never have done that. No one I know could have done that." She bowed to him, a deep and formal bow that was reserved for those of great honor. "Thank you for saving my pilots," she said. "Thank you for saving me." After she left, stared at the ceiling of the medical bay for a long time. He did not know how to feel about any of this. For 12 years, he had hidden from the attention and praise that came with what he had done on IV. He had requested quiet assignments, avoided promotions, kept his head down. He just wanted to fly and be left alone. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. When the fleet finally arrived at the Terran Alliance space station, there was a great celebration. The media focused on Commander's miraculous survival and the success of the joint mission with the. There were interviews and press conferences and award ceremonies. Handled it all with grace and skill, accepting the praise while making sure to mention the brave pilots who had served under her. She did not mention by name. He had asked her not to. He requested reassignment to cargo duty. The same quiet job he had always done, transporting supplies to distant stations where no one knew his name or cared about his past. He wanted to disappear again, to become invisible, to go back to being nobody. But Commander would not allow it. On the final day before the fleet was scheduled to depart for their home space, received a formal summons to the Blade of Ancestors. He considered ignoring it, but he knew that would only delay the inevitable. They were not the kind of people who gave up easily. He put on his cleanest uniform and reported to the great hall of the flagship. What he found there made him stop in his tracks. The entire crew of the Blade of Ancestors was assembled in the vast chamber, hundreds of warriors standing in perfect rows. They wore ceremonial armor that gleamed under the lights, with weapons at their sides and medals on their chests. The hall was decorated with banners and symbols that did not recognize but could feel were important. At the far end of the chamber, on a raised platform, stood Commander. She was dressed in the most elaborate armor had ever seen, covered with symbols and decorations that marked her as one of the highest-ranking officers in the Dominion. Beside her stood Officer Aya and a dozen other senior officers, all watching with solemn expressions. Lieutenant Park announced, her voice carrying across the entire chamber, "Come forward." Walked down the center aisle between the rows of warriors. Every eye was on him. He had never felt so exposed in his life. When he reached the platform, descended to meet him. She was much taller than him, but she lowered herself slightly so they could look each other in the eye. 12 years ago, she said, a human cargo pilot saved 300 warriors on a world called IV. He fought beside us, bled with us, and carried our wounded to safety. When the battle was over, he vanished before we could thank him properly. She paused, letting her words sink in. We searched for him for years. We called him the brother, and we told stories of his courage to our children. He became a legend among our people, proof that humans could be worthy allies and friends. Drew a ceremonial blade from her belt. It was beautiful, made of a metal that shimmered with inner light. Today we have finally found him, and today we will give him the honor he deserves. Before could react, made a shallow cut across her own forearm. Silver blood welled up from the wound, the same color as the scar on his arm. Lieutenant Park, she said, holding up her bleeding arm. By my blood, I name you brother of the. From this day forward, you are not an outsider. You are one of us. Any ship of our people in any galaxy will answer your call. Any warrior of our people will fight beside you and die for you if necessary. This is the oath of the, sealed in blood and witnessed by all who stand here. She pressed her wounded arm against one, mingling her silver blood with the old marks on his skin. The assembled warriors struck their chests with their fists, a sound like thunder that shook the walls of the great hall. They shouted in unison. Stood frozen, overwhelmed by the moment. He had spent so long hiding from recognition, so long pretending to be nobody special. And now, standing in this hall surrounded by warriors who honored him as a brother, he could not hide anymore. Tears began to fall from his eyes. He did not try to stop them. I do not deserve this, he said quietly. I am just a cargo pilot. I just did what anyone would have done. Shook her head, a gesture she had learned from humans. No, you did what no one else would have done. That is why you are the. That is why you will always have a home among our people. She stepped back and bowed to him, a deep bow of profound respect. Behind her, every in the chamber did the same. Looked out at the sea of bowed heads, warriors who had pledged their lives in honor to him. He thought about IV, about the blood and fire and screaming. He thought about the years of quiet hiding, of pretending none of it had happened. He thought about the hollow, about the 11 pilots he had guided to safety. He had spent so long believing he was nobody. Maybe it was time to accept that he was something more. Slowly bowed in return. It was a human gesture, but they understood it perfectly. I do not need glory, he said, his voice steady now. I do not need medals or awards, but I will remember this day for the rest of my life. And if your people ever need a backup pilot again, I will be there. Silver eyes gleamed with warmth. Somehow, Lieutenant, I do not think you will ever be anyone's backup again. Allowed himself a small smile. For the first time in 12 years, he did not feel the need to hide. He was the brother, the human who had earned the respect of warriors through blood and sacrifice. And he was finally home,